she could have given to the school in that. And so I've been really interested in, and actually one of the things that didn't get a lot of focus actually in 7191 was around the creation of career ladders, which is how do you create opportunities for folks to take on more leadership or more responsibility, but also without having to leave the classroom, right? Like, you don't provide huge incentives for LeBron James to become a coach because that's actually not in your best interest. You would rather have him stay on the court. And so similarly, it used to be the only way for a teacher to get more responsibility and more compensation was to leave the classroom. And I think you don't want to have that be the only option. So we've been working on building, we call kind of a career lattice, which is both how do you have jobs for horizontal leadership development, which is you can stay in the classroom, you can be a master teacher, you can be a team leader, you can be an instructional coach. We're working on a marketplace where you could allow teachers to become almost part-time consultants. So imagine if you're a sixth grade math teacher and you put your math lesson plans out online, and all of a sudden people start using them at a rapid rate and adopting them. Is there a way that they can then call you and say, hey, could you come and do our math professional development on Thursday afternoon from 3 to 4? There's no marketplace or structure for that, and so a teacher is just a teacher, and then the folks who do professional development are hired guns who don't actually teach anymore. We'd love to build the expertise of great teachers to then be the ones that are coaching and leading that directly. And so I think that's one way that you long-term keep more great teachers, is having more chances for them to lead. And that was one of the reasons why I was most excited about 7191 is that it helps you identify who those transformational teachers are so we can rely on them to help us teach and coach and lift the profession. So the second thing we do is we started, as Ashley knows, and MJ knows because she was in it, we started this summer fellowship for teachers who are interested in other parts of social policy. And so we do law students, teachers, grad students. We do this 7-week summer fellowship where people come and have a chance to work part-time for an elected official on making policy and part-time for a local nonprofit on the ground practice, so that you give teachers visibility into the world of policy making and nonprofit change that kind of fills their world that they don't ever get access to. And so we've also found giving people more information and more opportunities to leverage their voice helps a lot too.
Thank you.
You bet. Yes.
I imagine the questions that you're getting here are very different than questions you get in other parts of the state, like Grand Junction or Pueblo. So I'm kind of wondering what kind of concerns have you seen in more rural areas brought up consistently, and what kind of solutions would you give them as opposed to the kind of solutions you're offering here?
I think it's interesting. In some places, the issues are very similar. So obviously, two big ones that come up are both jobs and economic opportunity, and particularly in rural areas, the diversification of the economy. And so how do you get access to more jobs if you are in a small town of 5,000 people? And so in those places, the big issue is broadband access, because you have in places that do have more broadband access, you have the entire internets as an economic development opportunity. So like in Leadville, that has good broadband, almost 35% of the folks who live in Leadville telecommute to other jobs, which means you can live in a small town where you want to live, but you can still work for a marketing company based out of Florida or a consulting team out of Denver or whatever it is. And so those infrastructure issues around broadband access become a really big deal in the rural areas, and economic development opportunities for what they feel are industries that are dying. So if you have factories that are going away or manufacturing jobs that are being eliminated, they've been very, so that part of the Colorado Opportunity Promise, I talk a lot in those places too. Water comes up there a fair amount. And surprisingly, affordable housing comes up in big ways in a lot of the mountain communities and some of the Western Slope communities as well, because even though it's not the highlands in terms of housing prices, compared to their wage levels, it's still a challenge. So I'd say we've still found that to be pretty big across the state. And there, I think, you need a joint investment strategy to have a state housing authority that can make more investment into local housing development with a local county housing authority that can match those funds. So you have a fund to be able to, because right now, like in Durango, we were in Durango 2 days ago, they can't, I stayed with a teacher who teaches in Durango who lives 15 miles outside of it, because you can't, like Boulder or Denver, it's very hard to afford to teach in Boulder and live in Boulder, very hard to afford to teach in Durango and live in Durango. So they have a huge affordable housing crisis there. We're trying to look at ways to create a fund that would build housing that could sustain that, because the market won't allow it. What it would cost you to build a market unit, no one can afford. So those are big ones that come up in rural areas still, as affordable housing and economic development.
Thank you.
You bet. Yes?
What's your position of welcoming immigrants and refugees, especially given the crises in Honduras and Syria? Is that like a huge controversy with sanctuary cities, sanctuary states?
Yeah. My belief is I don't believe it makes sense to spend state resources as governor to break up families of law-abiding residents who are here trying to build lives for themselves. And I think that Colorado, one of the things I'm most proud of about Colorado is it has, I think, historically been a very welcoming place, with the exception of Amendment 2 20 years ago, which was we had to live out. I think this has been a place where the sentiment has been kind of, this is the frontier. If you make it out here, we don't care who you came from or who your granddaddy was. Like, this is a place where you can make opportunity for yourself. So my hero on this is a guy named Ralph Carr, who you all probably know about, but Ralph Carr was the Republican governor of Colorado in 1941 when FDR put in place the precursor to the Korematsu case, which was the executive order interning Japanese Americans. And Ralph Carr, said, not only I won't help you round up my own Colorado citizens to put in the immediate camp in Colorado if you have a camp here, but moreover, if you are Japanese American from California or from New York and you're being persecuted in your own states, come to Colorado, because you can come here, you can buy land, you can still have access. And I think there is a spirit of that sense of welcoming that I think is unique to Colorado, and I would want to fight to preserve it. And so I think this is a similar place where we may find ourselves fighting our own federal government on it, and I think there are certain things you compromise on. Those values are not one of them. So if they want to blackmail us for $150 million of federal funds from the Attorney General's office, that's a trade I'd be willing to make if it means not making folks in our own state feel like they're persecuted. And, I mean, and the stories, I'm sure you hear them too, are profound right now. I've talked to a lot of teachers who have kids that aren't coming to school because parents don't want to bring them to drop off because they're afraid there's going to be raids at drop off. You have women who are victims of domestic abuse who don't want to report it because they're afraid that their kids will get deported if the police come. So it doesn't make anybody safer. I think it just drives people more into the shadows. Yes.
What's your position on communities' rights to keep fracking companies from going into their communities? I heard you're going to be in Longmont today. Longmont had their own, they passed a law for their own city.
Yep.
That said that they would ban fracking, and the governor brought a case, I believe, against him, and now Cynthia Kaufman is going against Boulder, where I'm from,
Yep.
For trying to do the same. What's your position on that?
Yeah. So the state Supreme Court has now said that that regulations have to be statewide, which is the current law that we're living under. I think the question is not from whether we ban it or not to how do we do it well in a way that matches the rest of our values. So as to your earlier energy questions, natural gas is the reason why we've been able to wean ourselves off of coal. Right? Like, it's been a big improvement for climate change in this state. But that being said, it should be a bridge that gets us to more and more renewables, and so I think we're going to need it. The question is how do we use it? I think there are three big criteria that you want to look at. One is not allowing fracking or drilling in places that are environmentally sensitive, so like the Thompson Divide out by Basalt, that's a good example. I think not allowing it in places that are geologically unstable. So if you look at, I was just at the company in Grand Junction yesterday who has done this layover map of earthquake activity in Oklahoma right now. And they're drilling into a bunch of sandstone that is unstable. So when you do that, you create earthquakes. You don't want to do that. And the third is, which is the most controversial one, and what is the setback or the set-asides from residential neighborhoods and from where people are living and gathering. And I think the question is, I think we need to push a little bit more on what those oil and gas rules are to say there probably need to be some combination of local abilities to have different, like, there may be different scenarios in each county or in each community that call for some idiosyncrasies in that local region. But then also there is some expectation that you would have. I understand the convenience of having a statewide set of rules for everyone to operate. I also think the folks that have the most resources to be able to make those investments are sometimes better situated to make accommodations for those changes than a homeowner who's been there for 20 years. And so, the law of the land right now is after one set of statewide regulations. I think the Oil and Gas Commission has a chance to revisit those rules and say, how can we speak to making it more accommodating to the residences? Because I think we have right now a real sense of anxiety in places like Longmont, Boulder, and even North Denver and others, that there's not enough setbacks. So I don't know what the right number is on that, but I do think there's going to need to be a new round of conversations about what those are.
It sounds like you have some faith in the Oil and Gas Commission that I may not share. One of the things that just happened that I saw in the paper was that the state stopped the lease for the Erie Tower that NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, was doing studies of methane and other non-volatile organics that come off of fracking, and they were collecting a data set that could intelligently inform this conversation, and the state, under pressure from the fracking natural gas industry, shut down the lease to that. Would you be interested in pushing to open that back up?
Shut down the lease to
To
NOAA's
the Erie,
research?
to the Erie site where their tower was, where they were doing that research.
So, but it's NOAA that they're denying access to do this research?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
It does, it doesn't.
I would have to learn more. I don't know that
Okay.
backstory, but I'd have to read. I've
Okay.
been to NOAA and visited, and I've been very impressed by their work. So I think more research is always a good idea. But I don't know the facts of that, so I'd have to look into it. But in general, I tend to think that the more information we have, the better.
All right. And the Oil and Gas Commission, you have some faith in them that I...
I mean, I think that they,
Sorry,
like all bodies, respond to public pressure, and so I think that they've tried to navigate a middle ground, and I think they haven't made everybody happy. But I think that there has been, we have a lot of ways people have tried to fight this battle, whether it's ballot initiatives, and I think Oil and Gas Commission realized if they don't come up with a more satisfactory solution, people will overleap them and go to other solutions. And so I think they have incentives to try to get it right. And I've talked to some woman in Basalt last night who's on it, who's I think agrees with a lot of your perspective on it, who wants to make changes. And so I think they have a diverse group. I'd like to give them a shot at it. But
How would you differentiate yourself from our current governor in this respect? Because he's got a reputation as being pretty pro-gas.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I had to go back to the question you raised earlier, which is I think that it is an important part of the all the above energy strategy we have now, which is helping us accelerate renewables. I think I would want to move more aggressively towards renewables than others have, and probably more aggressively than HIC wanted to. So I think it's an important part. I'd just like to make sure we get more aggressively towards the renewable portfolio, and that we're sure that we are protecting ecologically, sort of environmentally sensitive places, geologically stable drilling, and with reasonable accommodations through residential neighborhoods.
Cool. Thank you.
You bet. Yes, do you want to get the last one?
When it comes to, you're talking about moving aggressively towards renewable, is there
Yep.
a certain area within the renewable energy field that you would value more than another area? Or do you think it's like whoever puts their hand in the pot first gets whatever's in the pot?
I think we want to keep space open for innovation in that, so I don't think we want to mandate X% has to come from certain industries and we'll require that to happen. I think there's growth coming there. But I do think that there is a lot of promise in more distributed generation, which is in the creation of more solar that is located closer to the places where it's used, and also closer to distribution hubs, right? So the challenging part for utility grids is if you build a giant solar farm that's 10 miles from the rest of the grid, you have to create electricity, you have to create pipes to get there. And so the idea of building more and more of these installations in the places where you already have hubs of electricity, I think make it easier to move them. So I think that some of the solar gardens and some of the more distributed generation, we're getting solar panels on our house right now, which has turned out pretty well, actually. They've been very helpful about it. So I think some of those places where it's less industrial scale but more distributed generation, I think it's going to have a lot of promise down the road, especially as it gets cheaper and it gets easier to install. Because then what you have is the ability for houses, and then if you have an electric vehicle, you're now almost your own self-contained electricity grid, right? Because you bring solar off your roof, whatever you don't use, you put into your car battery, which then you use during the day to drive back and forth. You come back, and so you create a storage capacity. So I think more and more of these self-contained units become really promising areas for innovation in my mind. Just last closing before, thank you so much for spending the time for having me. If folks are interested in getting more engaged, we are going to be doing, we're doing campus leadership teams all around the state as I described. We're looking for folks to help us lead on everything from technology to policy, to organizing, to communications, and to build and lead teams on this campus that would do that. And so if you are interested, if you haven't met these two wonderful folks, Gabe and Michael are both here, who work on our team, and they'll be around to answer questions or give you contact information. I think this is a really critical moment where your leadership matters and where this race, I think, becomes the most important way that Colorado takes a stand to protect the values that feel uniquely ours. And so we'd love to have you engage and love to have you be a part of the team. And thank you so much for having me.